So we want to talk about first. Personally, I want to talk about Black. Well, honestly, we should probably save him for later,
Yeah, yeah.
towards the
I'll
end.
follow.
That way, everybody who watch all the censors who watch it don't.
Yeah, hit
Yeah,
us early on.
yeah, exactly.
Let me see real quick. I still don't see the video on mine though. Are you sharing the screen?
No, I'm not sharing your screen or sharing the Twitch screen. Is that what
Okay.
you were asking? Hold on.
Yeah. Let's see here.
So, for whatever reason, I'm not seeing the chat up. That's kind of weird.
All right. I just pulled up Twitch. Uh I can watch it directly through that.
There we go. All right. Well, I guess we'll talk about Trump first.
Yep.
I mean, what political theater, right?
Yeah, it has to be. At this point, um it's kind of giving away the game though. They're really showing their hand if the FBI is going to be um, investigating somebody like that, especially over what they're claiming to be doing it for, which is just the documentation. That's not like something the FBI should be doing in the first place. And, yeah, I know there are rules in place that if he had like documents and stuff, he's not allowed to have public office again. But like that's not really the job of the FBI to discover unless there's some kind of like national security threat in those documentations. And then I'm not really sure that would even be the agency to do it. Um, but it seems to me like the whole thing is theater. The whole thing is essentially just trying to make him look worse to people. Or maybe they were honestly just hoping they'd find, you know, something.
Well, apparently he does have them, right? I mean,
I don't know. I haven't looked that far into it. I have heard that there are supposedly like pictures of like paperwork in a toilet or something like that, and a redditor raised a very interesting question, saying like, how inept is Donald Trump that he's going to tear up the paperwork, put it in his toilet, not flush it, and have it to where you can just look down and see the pertinent names facing upward. Um,
seems a little too easy, doesn't it?
yeah, for sure. So yeah, um, I don't know. It definitely strikes me as theater.
I'll be honest, I haven't read anything about it other than the headlines. So that's pretty bad of me, considering I'm supposed to be talking about it this evening. But
Yeah, well, I'm guilty too, so I'm right there with you.
it's been one of those days.
Mm-hmm.
That's all right. We all know what I really want to talk about,
Uh-huh.
and that's Black Hitler.
Oh yeah.
And since we're coming up
Yeah,
on 10 minutes in the stream, I think it's perfect time to talk about it.
oh yeah. I'm wondering, do we want to pull up one of his videos? I mean,
Oh,
that might be
for sh-
risky.
no, we definitely do. We definitely do. I mean, I think it's worth the risk, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, if for any viewers who aren't familiar with him, just taking your word for it, it's not going to be enough. They have to actually see this.
Yeah, because it's that crazy.
Yeah.
What was that one video? Oh, here it is. The reparations video. That was the one that introduced me to him. So
Yep.
Well, if it ever loads. Be a terrible time for the internet to cut out, huh?
Yeah. Could be YouTube.
Yes, sir. That's taking a second here. So I told you about the Ezra Miller Google result with him, and I searched for it and nothing. I don't see anything about Ezra Miller, so I have no idea why that's there.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
But given Ezra Miller's crime spree, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, me either.
You know what? YouTube's not going to like this, but
Aquaba, y'all.
since they don't want to play the video, I just download it.
Yep.
So I was just chilling outside by the sun because I can do that because I'm black. And then White Jesus came to me. White Jesus was like, Gazi. I said, what, White Jesus? And he was like, you need to train male Saxons. I said, why, White Jesus? He was like, because just like dogs, they need training. I said, okay, I'll do it. So now I'm going to show you these well-trained male Saxons, toilet seat complexion individuals, okay? Disciples of White Jesus, okay? So let's talk to them real quick and let's see what they have to say.
Oh, the video isn't showing. I apologize. One sec.
No worries, man.
All right, here we go.
I'm black. And then White Jesus came to me. White Jesus was like, Gazi. I said, what, White Jesus? And he was like, you need to train male Saxons. I said, why, White Jesus? He was like, because just like dogs, they need training. I said, okay, I'll do it. So now I'm going to show you these well-trained male Saxons, toilet seat complexion individuals, okay? Disciples of White Jesus, okay? So let's talk to them real quick and let's see what they have to say. Uhuru?
It's still not playing video.
Do you owe reparations?
But that's all right. We'll do the audio. That'll be enough.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Why you say that? Wait, who is you?
Beryl Shepley.
Uhuru Barrel. Now, you owe me some money. Okay, you owe me reparations.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Because every freedom that I have and have taken for granted for my entire life has been made possible by wealth that my ancestors stole.
Uhuru. Good. Uhuru,
Uhuru.
what your name is?
Jackson.
Uhuru Jackson, you owe me reparations.
I do.
Why that?
Because I have benefited from the wealth that was stolen from you,
Tell it.
as have all my ancestors, the ones who owned slaves and the ones who did not, the Jews in, the white Jews in Hungary.
You better tell on the white Jews. Say that again.
The white Jews in Hungary, the fake Jews.
Yes, fake white Jews.
Fake white Jews.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So you unite with reparations.
Completely.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
What your name is again?
Jackson.
Uhuru Jackson.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
What's up, Uhuru?
Yep, you heard him, y'all. He said Uhuru. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Where you from?
Seattle.
He raised around all nothing but African people, y'all. So he don't know nothing about being white. He don't like white people. Ain't that right?
All white people owe reparations, though.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ain't that right?
That's true.
And what your name is?
Prince.
Uhuru, Prince.
Uhuru.
Now, why you up for reparations?
Because as a white person, I sit on the pedestal of colonialism and slavery that built not only the wealth of this country, but the whole European world. Therefore, all white people owe reparations, and we're coming to get it.
Uhuru, you better tell it.
The white man's coming to get it.
We coming to get it.
Uhuru. Uhuru,
Uhuru,
what your name is?
Jesse.
Jesse, you owe me reparations.
Correct.
And I want it. When do I want it?
Now.
When do I want it?
Now.
And you gonna get it for me?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Why you owe reparations?
Because every opportunity and amenity I have has been at the expense of my black and brown brothers and sisters around the world. Everything in this country is soaked, saturated with the blood of slavery, with genocide. Even the times that I've had to scrape for dollars in my life, they still bared the face of the slave master, genocidal maniac. And I know full well that even the homeless white man on the street corner is gonna get more head nods and ham sandwiches than the black man across the street. So every white person, no matter how little you got or think you got, you owe money. I owe money. And like my brother Prince said, like my comrade Prince said, if you don't give it, we're gonna come take
Coming
it.
to take it.
And I've seen Prince take it, all right? We by a church across the street, and Prince
I bet you have, Ghazi.
ran up on this old white man. What you say up to the old white man coming out the church?
I asked if you want to hear the gospel of reparations.
Hey! Uhuru,
Uhuru.
what your name is?
Virginia.
Uhuru, Virginia. Oh, do I look good in this sun, Virginia?
You always look good.
Thank you. Now you gotta hurry up because you gotta get out the sun, girl. You ain't got no sunscreen, girl. We gotta save your skin. Hurry up, girl. Hurry up.
Okay.
You know the sun don't like you, girl. Come on now.
Okay, every white person does owe reparations, and that is because we owe that money for the colonial oppression that our ancestors have, done to African people, and it continues to this day right here in the U.S., not just all over the world, but here in the U.S. So all white people, no matter who you are, you do owe reparations. You owe them right now, and you need to pay them right now.
Yes.
And you can go to uhurusolidarity.org and click on the button that says pay reparations. That's what you need to do. You need to do it now.
Uhuru.
Say one more thing.
Guess you may see them t-shirts real quick.
Black power.
Uhuru.
Hey, just like the chairman says,
You
Chairman
can
who?
already
They might
see
not know.
the cultish behavior with the Uhuru.
Oh yeah, the repetition and
Molly, I should tell her, the
Yes.
African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International. A lot of white people will say they don't want to pay reparations because they ain't have nothing to do with slavery. It happened so long ago. But what we have to understand is we are the inheritors of the social wealth that was created by slavery, and African people and other colonized people are the inheritors of the social despair and the social poverty that is the legacy of slavery.
Uhuru, and that is the power of African internationalism, turning cave beasts into revolutionaries for African people. Uhuru, 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 Uhuru. So you heard it here. If you are ready, if you are white, male
Turning
Saxon,
cave beasts.
okay, totally skin complexion individual, saltine American, and you are ready to join the revolution, where can you go?
You can go to uhurusolidarity.org and click on the red button that says pay reparations.
Now.
And pay those reparations when?
Now.
Reparations?
Now.
Uhuru?
Uhuru.
okay, that's it. So, do you even know how to spell Uhuru? How would I Google this? How would
That's a good question.
Anyway, I wanted to look at the Daily Beast and see what he was arrested for. He's so damn entertaining.
Uhuru. It's Swahili term, meaning freedom or independence.
Like I could probably sit there and talk to that dude for a day and not get bored.
Oh, he would be more than happy to tell you all about like how evil you are and how you lack empathy and you're a shell of a creature, cave beast.
Maybe you wouldn't be wrong.
Yep. That dude, man, he's like the inevitable conclusion of the Nation of Islam's Yaqub story. Like this guy like freaking buys it hook, line, and
You got to
sinker.
tell us what the story's about because I don't know.
Okay, so Nation of Islam is a political organization that actually, ironically, was started by a white guy. It's essentially black nationalism. It leans off of Garveyism, which is philosophy of Marcus Garvey, which is more about black nationalism. We give black people their own place, Wakanda forever kind of a thing. So the idea with Nation of Islam is that they're really fucking racist, and they don't like white people very much. And so I think it was Louis Farrakhan who actually came up with the story, but it might have been earlier than him. But the story goes that I think it's like 6 or 7 thousand years ago, like all men were black men, and there was an evil wizard named Yakub who was really smart but evil, who created the White Devil, and the White Devil didn't have culture and didn't have the ability to function like a man as a human. So they lived in caves until they eventually rose up and enslaved the black man. And he stole the black man's culture, the black man's arts and stuff like that. And whenever you hear the phrase, and then that's what ends up happening. Whenever you hear the phrase "white devil," it's a direct reference to Yakub, the Yakub tale from the NOI. Also, if you hear and it's referenced in a lot of stuff too. Like even the song "Gravel Pit" by Wu Tang Clan. At the end, they have a sample of someone talking about Yakub, the evil,
Gotcha.
monster.
Yeah.
So they actually literally believe that white people aren't human. That white people are um, like just a creation, essentially. That they're less pure. And
Basically,
what was
just
his name?
typical racist stuff.
Yeah, it's just pure on racist shit. It's tied in with the, like I said, black nationalism itself. Interestingly, this organization really kind of came to prominence in the post civil rights movement, which is part of what they called the New Left, or they did in the '60s. And what this brought about was the more militant reaction to civil rights. You had Martin Luther King Jr. and many others that were coming out with this: be a gadfly, get attention, be inconvenient, but let's not turn to violence. And then you had these other people like Malcolm X, who's more like, well, fuck integration. I want my own place. White man can go fuck themselves, that kind of thing. And then, Malcolm X, of course, being a famous member of the NOI, Nation of Islam, which, by the way, not related to Islam directly as a religion or anything. It's
Right.
its own thing. But the interesting thing about Malcolm X, of course, being that in his later years, when he actually left the United States and went around the world and saw outside of the American paradigm, he actually had a whole different way of viewing racial relations. In fact, he had an opportunity to see examples of the world where race wasn't a core factor that played a role in every aspect of interpersonal relations.
It changed him pretty completely, did it not?
Well, it certainly started to, and I think that's why he was assassinated. He left the NOI, and then he was murdered. Um, but his position, while not entirely changed, it was very dramatically changed and very clearly reversed. It made a big difference on his life, which I think is like extremely crucial. I always say if you ever wanted to end racism, all you'd have to do is just put different people together, have them grow up together. They won't be racist.
That's it.
And
That's why the what would I call them? The liberal coastal elite, I suppose, is so homogenous.
Like what I call the neo-progressives.
That's it.
Yeah. For anybody watching this, I use the phrase neo-progressive for a very specific reason. It's important to me that I think to create a differentiation or draw a distinction between what we maybe coming from the '90s would have considered progressive versus what we're seeing now with concepts like CRT or DEI or those kinds of concepts. The neo-progressivism is essentially regressive. I call it neo-progressive because they tried to usurp the label of progressivism, and I really don't see it that way. A good example of the neo-progressive outlook is that they're big on the equality of outcome or equity. They play a lot of linguistic games, rhetorical games, They believe in separate but equal, essentially. They're neo segregationists. If you see someone who's saying you are black first and foremost, you are white first and foremost, and they want you to exist in this identitarian framework, those are neo progressives. And the cost of these types of outlooks are, we become more separate, we become more uh, divided, and then they want to use collectivist lenses when they address matters of the individual, which is to say, as a white person, as we heard in the video, no matter how poor you are, you still have white privilege, and so they look at everything through a very simplified lens, and collectivist lens, and so that's more what I'm talking about with that.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we all know the smallest minority is the individual.
Right. Interestingly, though, going to what you were saying, you're talking about the coastal elites. They do exist in a bubble, and their bubble very much loves neo-progressivism. In fact, if it weren't for their bubble, neo-progressivism wouldn't have thrived. But to be fair, and I'm actually writing a piece up on this for the Jack Substack when I get around to finishing it. The interesting thing about that particular ideology is that it can be traced to its roots. When you get past its real bare bones roots, like the whole Frankfurt School, that whole outlook, whatever, Foucault and all that,
Yeah.
you can look at it from a political roots, and its political roots were part of the New Left. Again, coming out of the NOI kind of stuff, you had the Black Panthers and stuff like that. That kind of approach, Marcus Garvey, early Malcolm X, and when you get into that era, we start looking at the late 70s is when you really see it, start to become printed. You have Katz, Judith Katz. It might be Cates. I've never cared enough to find the proper pronunciation. She wrote a manual called White Awareness, which was a training guide that was one of the earliest examples of them applying the concept of whiteness, and they're using Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality, and
The
she's using like all these different types of things that
white
are all
awareness.
happening. Yes, that are all happening at the same time, and so the like I said, this is all happening around the late 70s. You have Derek Bell, who's seen as one of the grandfathers of CRT, critical race theory. You have Kimberly Crenshaw, and you have like Kate's or Katz, whatever, publishing that book. At the time, you also had Biddle, who was trying to redefine in the school system racism as entirely a systemic thing, which is P plus P, uh, prejudice plus power,
Right.
which of course inevitably means that you tie that to the whole concept of the whiteness, the concept of whiteness, and then you can see how there's a kind of agenda already at play in the way that they're using terminology to sidestep certain types of debates or to even avoid making their own case. It's inherently begging the question. But that being said, so in late 70s, if you think about it, around the time that Yuri Bezmenov came out, defected from the KGB, and started talking about, how the KGB was launching cultural shifts, in the West, specifically the US. Um, this started to hit in universities, and then from universities, it takes time. From the late 70s, early 80s, that raises the new generation. They kind of come to see it as a general, like as something that they learned, and they raise the next generation, and so on and so forth. And what we have now at this point is a kind of homogeneity in universities where they're teaching these concepts as established truth, as fact. And of course, as they say, we live in a post-truth reality, which is to say, your lived truth, everything's subjective.
Right.
So the where we're at right now is, you think about the liberal elites, right? They come from a lot of these universities. Universities are predominantly um, contaminated, because I use that word very specifically, with this ideological framework that spreads. Those people go on to create film. They go on to run businesses. They go on to do big things, and they tend to do it on the East Coast and the West Coast, the bigger cities like LA, San Francisco, New York, maybe Boston, that kind of a thing. And so what happens is you have this ideology germinate on the back end. The average citizens don't see this. We have television shows in the 90s like Captain Planet, you have in the government making deals with television companies to add like remember to turn off the lights, at the end, and don't do drugs. Now knowing's half the battle. I remember Michelangelo telling me on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to brush my teeth and leave the water off while brushing. So that kind of era was happening on the forefront, but it made sense. I mean, it was kind of progressive for its time, and certainly I would, I guess, consider it sort of progressive coming out of where we
But
were
it
in the
wasn't.
Cold War.
It wasn't being used as like a cudgel to bludgeon people over the head
Oh,
with it.
right, right, right. Well, and those messages were kind of basic. It's don't do drugs, don't waste resources, nothing major there. Um, Now
Really,
flash
something
forward,
everybody kind of agrees with.
right, exactly. And so on the forefront, we saw TV shows like Living Single. We saw Martin. We saw all kinds of different TV shows where you have black people up there. And Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, one of the most famous shows of all time. And that was never a particularly bothersome thing to at least my generation because, it was a given. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. Those shows were quality first. They were well written. They were entertaining. They did touch on things like racism and stuff like that, but they did it well. They did it very well written. Um, and so those things made sense.
I mean,
Those things I would argue
I'm sorry, I want
are
to interject real quick. I know
okay.
you're on a roll here, but listen, that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode where Carlton's packing heat, man, I tell you what, it gets me every time. That
Yeah,
one and the one with his dad.
Yep, that's true. But I would argue that those kinds of expressions in the public consciousness, that's up front, that everybody's aware of. Those were actually a product of more MLK kind of integration. It was more of that kind of civil rights approach. But when we would think of things like militant, like when you think of feminists in the 90s, right, you would think there's the militant feminist, shaved head and all this stuff, right? But they were the outlier. Mostly it was just women saying, hey, I want to work and I want that to be normalized. And but so when you would think of like the shaved head, the hates men, like that's that weird crazy chick on campus in some like comedy,
Yeah.
that wasn't like the norm. That wasn't the general sense. That's because what she represented was what was happening on the back end at the universities, and at the time had just started to germinate. That ideology that was on the background in the 90s at this point would go on to be what ran the school system, not just in universities, but the school system. We're talking like the actual like teachers unions, things like that. And so these kinds of ideologies, the neo-progressive angle or reaction to civil rights became so dominant on the back end, people didn't see it was there unless you worked at a university or something like that. And it wasn't until the 2010s that people recognized, oh, this is a problem. And as always, I'm going to have to pull out Jack's razor here. It was Gamergate that brought it to the forefront. Gamergate exposed it, and
It exposed it in the media.
right, yeah, it made it mainstream. And a lot of that, I think, is their own fault for trying to cover it up, the way that they did, and they just made it worse and worse at every turn. But and that's we could do a stream on that by itself.
For
That's a whole
3
project.
hours and 45 minutes probably.
Probably. But but so like, around that time though, you see like what happened to Brett Weinstein or Weinstein. I know he's particular about how it's pronounced, Weinstein. Um, what happened to him and his wife, and then there were other events that were happening. You have Milo, of course, during the uh, his tour, which was going around the universities, and he was putting on blast essentially how limited the actual freedom of speech was at these universities. So it was really in the mid 2010s that it was exposed to the general public, but it wasn't until Donald Trump that it was actually like really made mainstream. Now, since then, what are we looking at when we see it on the forefront in our television, our shows, and our medias? It's not like, oh, hey, don't run water while you're brushing your teeth, or hey, don't be mean to somebody because their skin color's different. It's white people are privileged and they need to pay reparations, and black people are always through a struggle and all this different stuff. The environment is going to like literally die tomorrow, which I plan to do a Substack on that as well, because I'm sure we all remember when the Pentagon said that oh man, let me see if I can actually pull this up and send it to you. The Pentagon straight up did a report that said something like the polar ice caps would be melted by 2010 or 2012.
I can
If
find
like,
it.
yeah, it's something like that. It's obviously debunked because we're well past that. But um, finding articles too, like the algorithms always want to throw up what's more recent, which is frustrating. But
It is very frustrating. Very
this
frustrating.
this would have been back during Bush's tenure, if I remember correctly, like the early
Okay.
2000s. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. That a lot of the narratives we hear, this is going to happen at this time, this is going to happen at this time. That's been going on actually for a long time. Historically speaking, and I don't want to dig too much in this again. That's its own subject. But historically speaking, we went from like the oil is going to dry up, like in the early like 20th century. That there was narratives like that because it
Yep.
was designed to influence public policy. Um, so it's not new, but point is what we're seeing now at the forefront when we watch a show and is really the culmination of neo-progressivism manifesting. And the biggest concern with it isn't even necessarily, for me, ironically, it isn't even necessarily that they're using an ideological framework that I obviously don't agree with. Um, but they're terrible writers. Like almost
Of course, that's your biggest gripe. I respect
yeah.
it though. I respect it.
If they're gonna throw propaganda at me at every turn, at least do it with some quality. Jesus.
And I agree. That's the worst part is that it's not even good. It's not even good
Right.
propaganda. Like we could draw some propaganda up here in about 10 minutes and be more effective with it.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. And I mean, yeah, you can like a lot of great fiction has messages, and I can enjoy it whether I agree with the message or not. Um, this is something else. Like you used the perfect word, bludgeon. This is a bludgeon. And yeah, so anyway, it's just interesting to me to note that a lot of this has been germinating behind the scenes outside of the public eye, and really only certain people would have even noticed that. And as George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it, and that's true for us.
Oh, that's certainly true.
Now that they're kind of like exposing themselves, then now it's easier for us to see, especially in the information age. Internet makes a big difference. The
It's one of the
exposure.
greatest perks of social media.
Oh, hands down. Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. Anyway, so yeah, that's going. I guess with all of that said, we can get back to oh, what's his name?
Ghazi.
Ghazi, yeah. So what's in the? Why is Ghazi in the news now?
I think he got arrested. Hold on. I was trying to Google stuff as you were talking about it for the screen, but
Yeah. Actually, I'll be right back. You go ahead and look at that.
all right. Oh, well, isn't that something? Far left activist Ghazi Coat. I'm going to butcher his name. Sorry, bro. Ghazi Kodzo rose to internet notoriety last year with a series of bizarre online pronouncements he made as the leader of a fringe communist group called the Black Hammer Organization. Kodzo's online declarations, including the claim that Holocaust victim Anne Frank was a whiny Karen, seemed designed to go viral as proof of left-wing activists out of control and earned mentions from Fox News and other conservative outlets.
I think out of control is a reasonable description.
Did you hear what he called Anne Frank?
Yeah.
Okay. But on Tuesday, Black Hammer, dubbed a cult by some former members, culminated in tragedy. That morning, an anonymous caller in a suburban Atlanta home rented by Black Hammer contacted police to report they were being held against their will. When police searched the home, they ordered Kodzo and 9 other people outside. In the Hughes is how the Daily Beast spelled it. I assume they mean houses. In the house, they found an 18-year-old man named Amonte Almonds dead of what police call an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. And Kodzo, 36-year-old, whose legal name is Augustus Romaine, faces a bevy of criminal charges, including aggravated sodomy, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit a felony, 2 counts of false imprisonment, 2 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of aggravated assault, 2 counts of criminal street gang activity. Wow, that's a hell of a sheet, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to admit, if Ghazi were satire, it'd be one of the most brilliant things I had ever seen in my life.
Absolute genius. Like, better than Alex Jones.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, he's not satire, it turns out. So,
not like Alex Jones, guys. Sorry. Alex Jones is still satire. I'll die on that grave, on that hill.
yeah, I like I said last stream, I agree. I think that's probably mostly where he's coming from. I think the interesting thing about Alex Jones is that there actually have it's interesting because I know that there's a lot of things that he's often picked on for are things that have actually have a foot in truth. Like the whole turning the frogs gay.
Yep.
They didn't turn the frogs gay. It was changing their sex, if I remember correctly. So there was still a story there, but the story was less about what was actually happening with these pesticides and more about Alex Jones himself.
Look at Crazy
He
Frog
became
Man.
the story.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So yeah, he's an interesting character for sure.
Oh, he's gonna go bankrupt, almost guaranteed after this lawsuit.
I don't know. So Kim Iverson is a independent journalist I follow, and she did some coverage on this recently, talking about how they actually have insurance for kind of liability insurance for this kind of stuff.
No shit.
And actually, yeah. Hold on one second. I'll send it to you. She okay. Let me see here. Yeah, she was on The Hills, The Rising for a period of time. Unfortunately, they had a falling out because most of her coverage, a lot of her coverage is regarding COVID and things like that, which a lot of people don't go near. And they happened to have Anthony Fauci on the show, and they intentionally cut her out of it. All right, I'm throwing into the Discord a link.
Yeah, let me move on because this
Well,
is
at
not
least
even...
Nope.
Yep. No, we don't have to watch the whole thing. It's like 20 minutes, and I don't have that much time,
So
unfortunately,
Alex Jones
today.
has been
But this is some of her coverage, and she did note on Twitter recently about that as well, which I
ordered to
think I
pay
can probably pull up easier
45.2
if I can get
million
Twitter to
on
actually
top of a
acknowledge
4.1 million
I got
her.
in
Twitter up.
defamation lawsuit
So yeah, if
brought
you can
forward
find
by
Kim
the parent of
Iverson,
one of the victims of Sandy Hook. And many in
excuse
the
me,
media and social
at
media
Kim
are
Iverson
applauding
show.
this as the end for Alex Jones,
She
that this will be
tweeted,
his demise. But the reality is he might not have to pay a dime.
recently.
So
I think it was a day or two ago about the subject in response to Scott Adams. Yep. That would be August 6th.
Yep, Alex Jones, like many who are in the public, have liability insurance for scenarios like this. Insurance won't pay out the $50 million. Anyway, Texas law caps it at $750,000 per plaintiff. He's looking at $1.5 million plus $4.1 million, and he's worth $240 million.
Yeah, I think you'll be fine. I think it's interesting that Scott Adams' response was to complain about his own professional liability insurance going up.
No shit, from out because of Alex Jones.
Yeah, as you can see, her responses to Scott Adams, and he says, "Do you have any idea what the Alex Jones verdict will do to my professional liability insurance rates? Free speech got a lot more expensive." That's funny coming from Scott Adams, who's taken up some dubious positions, in my opinion, of late.
His COVID broke that man, like it did many people.
Yeah, I agree. It's a real shame too, because like I saw a lot of people that I really respect, unfortunately, just kind of lose their mind over that. But it is what it is. We're only human.
That is true. Well,
Yeah, he was responding to Jack Posobiec. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I still to this day have no idea.
I don't either. That's how I pronounce it.
Yeah. Jack said they are using Alex Jones to go after freedom of speech. If you don't speak out against this, you will be next. And I kind of agree. I think that it's good to be in a place where a person can make a case that your freedom of speech was not only false but did me harm, and then you can use that as a way to get compensation. But they shouldn't censor either. Censoring is the worst way to do it, in my opinion.
Yep.
And I do feel like they are going after Alex Jones. But like I said in the last stream, my biggest concern is how do we define what harm is done? Because as we know, going back to Gamergate, Anita Sarkeesian famously said, it's not just death threats, it's also the little things like you suck, words of violence, that whole concept. So you have to be really cautious about that. And I feel like there's definitely a distinct movement in that direction. I also think it's kind of telling how much there's a unified response to certain people and certain things. All major social media companies walked lockstep with the government and the UN when it came to matters of discussing COVID and things like that. But they also walk lockstep the exact same way in responding to Alex Jones. When I think it was Twitter was the first to cut him off, and then when that happened, it was like a cascade
It was
of
everything. Facebook,
right.
Everything. Even credit card companies wouldn't even take money for him anymore.
Exactly. That's true persona non grata. And so what we're looking at with that is a kind of collusion that proves that at least the corporations work together, which we already know, certainly. Davos is perfect evidence of that. But, we also now have evidence of collusion with the government. And when you have the government working hand in hand with corporations like this over something as powerful as speech, then we have to be cautious about what we support. Like, even if people hate Alex Jones and see him as the worst person in the world, I think Jack is onto something there. He raises a really very valid concern that if we can allow somebody to be dogpiled for saying something we don't like, then him being financially culpable for any damages isn't even enough. It's not just enough that he has to pay this family for damages done. That should be enough. But no, they want him silenced.
Right.
And this goes back to the concept or the issue with Ghislaine, whatever, Maxwell. Yeah. That she apparently, I'm just remembering off the top of my head, and I didn't retain the actual numbers, but my understanding is that she's getting something like 20 years, like low security kind of resort kind of prison.
That's what I remember as well.
And meanwhile, they're trying to get Snowden and they're trying to get Assange to presumably either kill them or like lock them away for the rest of their lives.
They would like
And
nothing better than to lock Assange away forever until he
Right.
kills himself, or they get a chance to kill him. Maybe,
Oh,
let the inner conspiracy theorists come out.
well, it's not even a conspiracy theory. There has been, is my understanding, and this is not something I really looked too deeply into because I guess my perspective is already like pretty concrete when it comes to the issue of Assange and the way that it's being handled. But my understanding is that there was evidence, a report of evidence that the CIA intended to have him assassinated. And those kinds of things are like it's kind of terrifying when we talk about the one right that differentiates the United States from almost every other country in the world. My if my memory serves correctly, there are only two countries in the entire planet that have freedom of speech as part of their constitution. And I've looked at this so long ago, I can't even remember what the other country was, but it's none of the ones you'd think it'd be.
It's definitely not. They're definitely not in Western Europe.
Right. And what freedom can you ever really have? All freedoms extend from your ability to speak out against things.
Art,
Like,
act,
it,
how you behave.
right. Well, and you have like to go to that famous quote um, by oh, my brain's going in too many different directions. Now I'm blanking on his name. Dude in the wheelchair, scientist.
Stephen Hawking.
Thank you. My brain was saying Christopher Walken, and I'm like, I wish. I think Could you imagine Christopher Walken playing Stephen Hawking? I'd watch that.
Yeah, I would too.
All right. So no, so like he made a famous quote a while back that essentially to paraphrase what differentiated man from other animals is that we learned to talk. And this is very self-evident to me. This is the most powerful tool that humans have. We can communicate, we can work together, and we can learn from previous generations. We don't have to start from scratch every time we, or just make assumptions. We're able to actually communicate.
It
and
sure
work
feels
together.
like we start from scratch a whole lot.
Yeah, well, I think that's intentional. But that's another conversation. So if that is what makes us so powerful, then the person who controls that facet of the human experience is truly the most powerful person on the planet. And as the saying goes, look at who you can't criticize. That's the person who controls you.
Jesse Teigen or Chrissy Teigen's dead baby.
I have no idea what you mean by that.
Oh man, they were banning people and everything for making jokes about Chrissy Teigen's.
Oh man. Unfortunately, on that note, I have to hop off. But yeah, we should do another stream here soon.
I really will. All right, I'll probably shoot for Thursday.
Sounds good, man.
All
Works
right.
for me.
Have a good night.